So going back to kind of getting an understanding of customer needs and some of their preferences, I like to use the simple language. And so, a 3-question test that you can use in terms of trying to understand what customers want are really 3 questions. It's the give me, do they want speed, do they want safety, etc. It's the help me to, help me to fly somewhere, help me to connect to some person better or more efficiently. And the last one is save me, time, money, risk, hassle, etc., or save me from negativity. All of those things are really that you can bucket a lot of wants and needs, almost all wants and needs, into those 3 simple words. Segmentation might not be the end-all be-all, but how do we know? What's a useful segmentation strategy? Well, it needs to really make sure that it is aligned with your overall strategy as your company. What's your overall marketing strategy in terms of what you're trying to accomplish? But at the end of the day, it needs to point you to opportunities, how to serve or connect with the market more efficiently or more directly. The segmentation strategy also needs to really align and connect with customer and customer behavior. That customer insight that you're getting from understanding behavior should allow you to personalize, connect, and message and communicate value more effectively to that consumer. The other thing that happens over time, you want to make sure that you can change, as markets change and people's behavior change, that you can adapt. And your segmentation strategy can allow you to adapt and change and respond to those changes either in consumer behavior or in the marketplace or the competitive dynamics as a whole. This is an example of a segmentation strategy that a beauty product companies came up with by creating personas, specifically on a scale of women that are less beauty seeking to more beauty seeking, and created a scale of terms from the minimalist woman to the ultimate beauty woman, they call them. And so they have actually personas they assign to them, and so that they can communicate and reach these women differently depending on their attitudes towards beauty seeking. Okay, let's take a look at this slide, and this is just another segmentation example where it combines a number of variables, and the goal of this firm was to segment the low-rise jean market for a jean manufacturer. And it's interesting, you can see here, because it looks at some typical demographic variables, age-wise, male, female, etc., by geography that we talked about, but it also brings in some other things in terms of pilots or dog owners, etc., BMW drivers. And so it looks at the ability. So some variables have strong explanatory valuables and allow you to segment effectively, and some do not. So you can take a look at this slide and just as an illustrative example. Okay, so this slide just shows an example of coffee companies and the coffee company's strategy they're employing in terms of segmentation, and then segmentation in terms of who they're targeting. Basically, which groups of people are they communicating to, and how they're providing value differently to one group to another. And you can see here that this lists basically 5 different strategies that companies have in terms of them communicating value to different groups of people that are going to feel that different things are important. So, for example here, Green Mountain Coffee, they're targeting more the eco-consumers, or the kind of be green people, and they create messages that appeal to those people. And if you go to the far right, it's in terms of Starbucks, Caribou type strategies. They're trying to sell a lifestyle and a lifestyle associated with their brand. So they're communicating different values to different people, and hoping that the things that they're communicating are going to appeal to that group or some subgroup of people. And that's really the essence of segmentation. For segmentation to be successful, there are really 6 elements that you need to manage to in terms of your segments need to be identifiable, sustainable, accessible, stable, responsive, and actionable. And really, what does that mean? So identifiable, you need to identify how do you get to that segment. So like we talked about, it's easy. Demographics characteristics, we can identify males versus female. We can identify people by where they live, etc. So we can identify and measure against those variables. The second one is probably the most important. It needs to be substantial. A segment really only matters if it's big enough that you can actually create value to that segment, but you can also capture the value coming back from that segment. They have to be large enough to matter, so big enough. It has to have some scale in a segment. The third one's also really important, is accessible, right? So accessible really matters, is how do you reach that segment through your marketing and advertising? So a lot of companies want to reach, say, very, very wealthy people, but that's difficult, right? So how can you reach a billionaire, for instance? Really, you can't just go buy a list of billionaires and be able to communicate value to them directly. And so that's really difficult for companies. So access matters. How can you reach that consumer through your marketing and advertising efforts? How do you communicate value to them? right? Another characteristic is stable. You have to be able to communicate value to that segment over time. And the next one is really important. It's responsive, right? So it's like, you know, you're communicating value, you're picking your marketing mix elements to communicate value for that particular segment. They need to be able to, they need to respond to those efforts, right? They need to make sure that if you're communicating value to them, that they're responsive to that. And that doesn't all rely in terms of the choice of the segment. It relies on your creative, it relies on the message, it relies on your positioning that we're going to really get into and talk more about. But they need to be responsive to that, or the segment isn't going to be a value segment. The last one, it really needs to be actionable. So you really need to make sure that your marketing decisions that you're making, you know, if you combine all those other elements, that it's actionable, that we can make decisions that are going to have some effect in our communicating value and connecting with that segment over time. So really this is just an output of a segmentation study, and it really looks at some of the demographic variables from gender, age, occupation, education, and it assigns a value of that population in the 4 different groups. And this is typically what the initial part of segmentation studies move to. They move to some report like this where you're actually creating descriptive statistics against the different groups that you're segmenting with. So this is basically an example of segmentation data coming to life. And this is for a digital camera purchasing experience. And so basically this is using multiple variables and then categorizing the data and illustrating this data in a visual way so you can get some insights and understanding of what's going on here. So take a quick look at this chart and, you know, come and think about like what's really going on in this chart. So basically this is looking at different types of users in terms of purchase decision, self-consumption, or a gift. And it looks at people that have different familiarity or levels of expertise, professional, hobbyist, or family-focused camera users. And on the left side, it looks at their experience with computer and their age. So it's combining multiple variables and looking in terms of which cameras are appealing to segments that have those variables or characteristics associated with them. And you can see here that, so for the fully loaded digital cameras, we're going to appeal more to a older self-consumption professional rather than a basic digital camera, which makes sense, right? It's going to typically be a gift, but it's going to really focus on the family-focused, less sophisticated tools and capabilities for that camera. And so this is just taking data and showing it in a visual way, but it kind of makes sense in terms of actually how camera companies actually segment their products and product offerings. So this is another segmentation example in terms of what a company can take actions with different segments. And this one looks at variables in terms of ages, male and female, and ages 18 to 29, 30 to 34, and 45 and older. And also looks at what they're typically listening to on the left side. Are they a top 40 listener, or a classic rock listener, or are they a rap listener? And by combining those different variables, they can come up with multiple segments and look at which segments are going to be the segments that they want to communicate value to, and which ones they choose to communicate value to specifically. And so in this case, they've identified some high priority segments that have some different characteristics that they think that is going to be more valuable for their company, or their company is going to have a better way or a better opportunity to connect with those customers. So this is an example of self-reported segmentation where a bank was actually providing a survey to their customers in terms of where they are from an age standpoint, where they are in home ownership, et cetera, and then providing solutions that are tailored to that individual. So what they do is they're looking at where someone is in their life stage, and then they can offer products and services that are going to be more appealing or have a better fit with that particular segment. So this is another example of segmentation coming to life on how it's executed. Okay, so this is another example of the same bank looking at some of their day-to-day banking segmentation strategy. And it's combining some behavioral elements, some demographic elements, and then looking at what benefit that particular consumer is seeking, and then it's putting them into particular categories. So again, this is just another actionable way that companies can use segmentation to create strategies to reach different individuals. So what happens in segmentation ultimately is it allows you to positionate or communicate value differently. And so this is an example of a Harry Potter book, and this is a Harry Potter book that's actually the same book, but they're communicating value on the left side to more young adults, and they're positioning the product to young adults, or on the right side it has a different look and feel. So really a lot of companies do this where they take the same product, but they're communicating that value differently to different segments that are going to perceive different value associated with the product. So we're communicating with that particular segment on their terms. And so really that's another way that companies successfully segment, is by understanding what that particular segment is going to value and communicating in a way that's really appealing and ultimately valuable for them. So basically, what's marketing strategy, right? Marketing strategy we talked about is segmentation, targeting, positioning. And ultimately, the marketing concept is really understanding your customer needs and preferences. Are you able to group your customers into segments based on those needs and preferences? And then how you communicate value, that's you're picking one segment that you're targeting, and then your positioning and branding in terms of communicating attributes and value in a way that that particular target cares about or meets the needs of that particular target segment. So after companies create segmentation based on behavioral or demographic or other variables, are looking actually to create segments, they need to go through another exercise to kind of prioritize segments. You can't communicate value to everybody, so you need to prioritize. Certain segments obviously are going to be more valuable than other segments. So companies need to have an understanding of which segments those are to be able to connect with those in terms of prioritize those segments over other segments if they're going to provide more value back to the company. So segmentation really works when we can actually see different product, promotion, communication opportunities within a segmentation model. So can we communicate value more efficiently and effectively to a particular group of people? That's where segmentation works. The other thing that's important to look at is in segmentation, can we measure the segments? Can we get data? Can we get insight on our ability to communicate value more effectively to one group of people versus another group of people? So it's important, and this goes back to kind of the successful attributes of a segmentation strategy, but to close, it's can we reach the segment? And so, like I said, it doesn't do you any good to target billionaires if you really can't reach those people effectively or communicate value to them effectively. And the other side that we talked about before is the different mass market. So, right? So like, a Super Bowl ad, are you really communicating value to that huge group of people, or are you communicating to a particular segment? And so we're going to talk more about like that marketing mix and our ability to communicate value, but segmentation is probably kind of the first step in like the three elements of marketing strategy, and we need to just really understand the kind of that value and importance of segmentation and how segmentation works for companies.